in a lot of ways, and I say this all the time, the terrorists won that day. They won. They absolutely delivered a killing blow to the United States that we can't take back.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to A Conversation with Colin. I'm Greg, and this is my roommate, Colin. Now, sometimes Colin says crazy stuff. So every Tuesday and Thursday, I reach into the random topic pile, pull one out, toss it at him, and we talk it out for your amusement. If you like that, like the video, subscribe to us on YouTube, share us with your friends. Colin, are you ready?
Yes.
Today's topic of conversation is 9/11. This was submitted by Pelchio, maybe Pelch 100. Can't read my own handwriting. Well, it's also just a dumb name. 9/11, September 11th, 2001. I don't know how you want to tackle this bad boy. How do you want to?
What do we want to talk about?
He just said that. We say, at the end of the show, what do you want to see Colin talk about? He said 9/11, period.
I think 9/11 was a day that affected different people in different ways.
Okay.
But I think that it changed the course of American history, made certain things acceptable in this country that aren't acceptable, and also exposed real practical weaknesses in our intelligence apparatus and the way we go about our business, and that we might need to watch our backs a little bit more than we had been at the time.
Yeah. You were living in New York at the time?
Yeah, I was in New York at the time. I was a senior in high school on Long Island. I remember that day very well.
Of course.
There's a whole personal aspect for me that I'm not going to get into about, my father's a New York City firefighter, or was. Much of my dad's firehouse died that day in Brooklyn. And the reason for that is because the city got so congested and fucked up that the only way into the city, into Lower Manhattan, Battery Park, was over the bridge or down Manhattan. So the firehouses that got most ravaged were the ones in Lower Manhattan or in Brooklyn, because they got over the bridge and can get there. So that happened to my father's firehouse, and thank God my dad's fine. But that day scarred my dad very much.
Sure.
And scarred my family very much, because we knew a lot of people that died that day. It was a scary day. Like, I don't remember a lot of specifics about a lot of things that happened in high school, but I remember that day very well, and I remember being in Mr. Graziano's astronomy class, and he was talking about what he thought happened and who it happened, and we ended up just leaving. I ended up just leaving, and they ended up letting school out later, and I was like, I'm going home.
Yeah.
I think that 9/11 was a wake-up call to our country about our own freedoms and our own ability to do what we need to do to protect our own interests, and also the ramifications of not showing any restraint in how you respond to these things. And so I think that going into Afghanistan after 9/11 was obviously the right thing to do, and we did the right thing. I think that the spin-off of using Americans' fear of terror and what was happening in the Middle East to go into Iraq in 2003 was wrong. And I definitely got caught up in that. I definitely supported the Iraq War.
Yeah.
And I was totally wrong about that.
I think a lot of people did, right? Like, it's that zeitgeist in the moment of like, we all wanted revenge, and we wanted someone personally to hate and get for this. Right. You know what I mean? And so that's why, like, even when they weren't really connecting it to 9/11, you were still like, well, we can't find Bin Laden. I almost said Obama. We found Obama pretty easy. We couldn't find Osama, you know what I mean? But you knew, well, over there's Saddam, right? Like, he's being bad too. Like, get somebody. There was no targets to bomb, right? That was the big problem with Afghanistan, right? That they didn't have like giant military headquarters to go in and take out and stuff, right? Everything was like hidden off the grid, and we were fighting like guerrilla terrorists.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing about America is, we have the greatest military the world has ever known.
Yeah.
And it's not even like close, like, we can do whatever we want. It's a matter of like, with the amount, like, if we want to put in the money and the personnel, like, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
And take whatever we want. And we didn't want to go full bore in Afghanistan for obvious reasons, because we learned lessons from the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in the 80s, and like, it's not a place you want to go, and you can't fight there. It's like the guerrilla warfare there is like so next level compared to what we went through in Vietnam that we didn't want to engage like we did in Vietnam, where we lost like 68,000 people. So we couldn't finish the task, which is why this is still going on. If we wanted to really finish the task, we could have. It required extraordinary measures,
Yeah.
We would have had to do things that we might not have wanted to do as a people,
Well, yeah.
And
like nuke the whole place?
Well, yeah, we often talk about, we could have used 2 tactical nuclear weapons in Afghanistan. I don't think, like, in historicity, I think Bush made the right choice by not doing that. But at the time, I don't think anyone would have blamed us because, first of all, no one's really there's nothing there. You're basically sealing cave dwelling, entrances and stuff like that by doing things like that.
Yeah.
But we showed restraint. I respect Bush for showing restraint there, which is, in contrast with the fact that, he didn't show any restraint with Iraq. But 9/11 changed everything because suddenly we have the TSA. Suddenly we have, the Patriot Act. Suddenly we have this NSA apparatus that's like spying on everyone.
Yeah.
It ratcheted up very Orwellian type fears in me that, that have changed over time because, I supported the Iraq War. When the Patriot Act was drafted, I was like, well, I thought about it 2 ways. I was like, this is kind of fucked up, but if you don't have anything to hide,
right? Everybody said
then,
that.
And it's like, and I'm like, but that has nothing to do with it,
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, and I say this all the time, the terrorists won that day. They won. They absolutely delivered a killing blow to the United States that we can't take back, and they tried to do it in 1993 at the World Trade Center. They tried to do it with the USS Cole, but it was real in 2000, but it was really that strike on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon that sealed the deal. Because they understood, like the Viet Cong understood, that the best way to get what you want out of a country this big and this powerful is to just fuck with them, And that the littlest, tiniest little flea can fuck with the biggest dog,
Yeah.
And they won. They won that day. And, like, I hate when people say, like, we have Al-Qaeda on the run and we killed bin Laden and all these things. Like, who gives a shit? Look what they did to our society, It took us all this time to even build a tower again. Nonetheless, get back to a point, if we ever get back to a point where we trust each other again, where, like, we don't have to have these fucking idiots in the airport going through our bags and harassing old women and children and all this kind of shit that we legalized spying on each other and the government just doing whatever they want. Like, those are the things that disrupt us from within. And it's like Abraham Lincoln always said, like, the United States will never fall from an external force. It will always fall. It will fall because of internal strife. Mm-hmm. And they just pressed the right buttons that day, Right. And so 9/11's lasting legacy is not about my family and not about the things we lost, because I really think that the memory of 9/11 doesn't loom large in a lot of people's lives because they just weren't fucking there, And I was.
You think so?
Yeah.
I think when we talk about, like, American history, right? Like, you obviously know way more than me, right? But I was always fascinated with American history, and it's one of those things. When I was in school, there was a moment where I debated going into it, right? Because I just loved American history so much. And for me, I think that's like, if you were alive on 9/11, I think that changed you, in just such a deep way. And it's like you're talking about how you remember what class you were in. Like, it's totally for our generation, like the JFK assassination, right? Like, my mom always talked about that she'll never forget what happened and who has said what and where, how they first found out about it. You know what I mean? And, like, that day is crystal clear to me still. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I think for a lot of people our age, it's just one of those things of, like, we all remember every part of that, and it is one of the. I think it changed everybody. I don't think it's just a New York thing or somebody who's, like, personally connected to it. Like, I think it was. You talk about, that terrorists tried with the, USS Cole and then the original World Trade Center bombing, and, like, why that didn't work right is because it wasn't live televised and, like, nonstop coverage, mm-hmm. right? I remember when I was a kid, I'd wake up to get ready for school. And so I'd watch the morning news on in my room or whatever. And I remember shots of smoke coming out of the bottom of the World Trade Center during the initial bombing in the 90s. And this is one of the things that I think sometimes New York takes for granted, or did back then, obviously now it doesn't have to worry about it, that I didn't understand what the World Trade Center was. There's been a bombing at the World Trade Center, they show smoke coming out of this, and it was like, oh, okay, like, I pictured a giant center, like, kind of like from Chicago, right, like McCormick Center or something like that, like a collection of different things that were there, you know what I mean? Like, I never knew the Twin Towers were the Twin Towers or the World Trade Center until they fell. Right. Like, when I woke up that day, my roommate ran into the room. I'd been at college, like, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, you know what I mean? Like, everything was brand new. I was an adult for you're on your own, and then, like, with a light switch, everything in the country changes. But he ran into that, and, like, that was the first real comprehension of what the World Trade Center was and what that was, and you know, I mean, to see it all come down and see and deal with the, you know, the monumental loss of life and how, you know, vulnerable we were and this, that, and the other, and like what you're talking about, like they were people, you know, the government was taking away liberties here and there, and you were like, okay, no big deal, you know what I mean? Like, make sure this doesn't happen again. Obviously, we're scared. We don't know how to fight this. We'll put up for that. I think that changed everybody in that day, and that's why it's bizarre to talk to people now who are like, oh, I wasn't even alive yet. You know what I mean? You're like, what? Like, how is that possible? How old am I? What is happening?
Yeah, I think I look at it two ways, because I agree with you partially in the sense that what I loved and respected about that day was that people look at New York as this thing, right? Like, I'm from New York, so I understand New York, and I'm a New Yorker, and I respect it. And even though I'm from, you know, I consider myself more of a Long Islander, like, the fact of the matter is I grew up, you know, in the shadow of New York City, and I used to go there all the time.
Yeah,
you know? And my dad worked there and all that kind of stuff, you know, as everyone's dads did. And like, I liked that day everyone was a New Yorker. It reminded me a lot of like NATO, where it's like an attack on one is an attack on all. Well, obviously, like, this is an attack on our country, but we were all New Yorkers that day because
100%.
we sympathized with what was going on, and the most strident fucking anti-North Southerner was a New Yorker that day. You know, like, but there's an aspect to not having experienced it firsthand that doesn't let the legacy loom large in your mind, and people forget about what happened that day. You know, in a very real sense. They remember that the towers fell, and they remember that the Pentagon was struck, but they don't remember it in that emotional way that we still have to remember it, because we were there. You know, like, I wasn't in New York City that day, but I remember what that did to the people that were there, and I saw it with my own eyes, and I was at those firemen funerals. You know? Yeah. And you don't hear a deafening silence like you hear when the bagpipes are playing at a fucking funeral for a firefighter, and that silence after it all happens, you know? And like, and you're in the middle of Garden City or somewhere on Long Island or in New York City, and it's just fucking silent, you know? And that's the stuff that people can't relate to when they say, you know, some people still make fun of me for my old Game Facts where I dedicate them to 9/11 and stuff like that, and I did that in high school.
Those people are assholes.
Yeah, but
Heads up.
But also they're like, you know, 9/11, blah, blah, blah. It's like, you don't get it. You know? Yeah. Like, you weren't affected by it any more than any other American was affected by it. But New Yorkers were affected by it in a very specific way. And New Yorkers who knew people that died and people who had their fathers there were affected by it in a very specific way. You know? My father is still haunted by that day. You know? And my dad actually does great work. You know, he's retired now. Got his master's degree in social work, and is actually one of the social workers that deals with the survivors and their families for the FDNY. And they respect him because he was there. Yeah. You know, he's not one of those guys that's like, I understand how you feel. I understand. No, I really do understand how you feel. I'm the one who dragged bodies out of the fucking rubble. Yeah. You know? So when you don't know someone like that, and you don't hear those stories, and you don't have that remembrance, and you don't remember your dad's best friend's dead, and you're at his funeral, and your dad's face at that funeral. Mm-hmm. Well, then you can't understand any of it, you know, in the same way. So there's two different ways to look at it. There's the way of like how it affected all Americans, and that sucks, and that's like the lasting ramification. But there's the emotional ramification of, it's the same way we look at like the dying World War II veterans at Iwo Jima, and like we have to get the stories out of them now because they're dying, and we can only remember the things they've said, but we didn't experience it like they experienced it. Well, it's the same thing. You know?
Yeah, I wasn't trying to say that we all experienced on that level by any means. I'm just saying I don't want you to discredit what that day means to somebody who wasn't there. I want to make sure we're very clear as friends that I was not saying, obviously, everybody has the same emotional connection to this. But I think that I don't think anybody who was alive and a cognizant adult at that point today forgets 9/11. Is what I'm saying.
No, I don't think so either. Okay. And like, I think that we often forget to talk about a lot of people ask me about what I feel about 9/11 truth and stuff. 9/11 truth is garbage. Like, this suggests such a conspiracy, the likes of which we talked about conspiracy with JFK and how many thousands of people must have been on, or the moon landing, and no one said anything yet. Like, give me a fucking break. You know?
No whistleblowers on the entirety of bringing down two buildings.
I don't care about the science behind it, because the science behind it could be compelling. But these things happen and no one's said anything about it yet. You think the CIA has everyone that wrapped up, and like all these external forces are like having... All right, enough of that. There are all these kind of outstanding questions about what happened that day, but I think the only outstanding question for me is what happened in Shanksville, and will anything ever be normal again now? And I don't think that anything will be normal again. And I don't mean that in an emotional way. I don't mean that as a New Yorker. I don't mean that, as someone who kind of experienced it more firsthand than most Americans did. Mm-hmm. The way I mean that is, we lost a lot that day that had nothing to do with human life. And we have to be more careful about those kinds of things in the future. I don't want to say government looks for reasons to take away your rights, like those kinds of reasons, but they kind of do.
Yeah.
And we didn't need to lose everything we lost. We already lost so much that day, right? Like, we didn't need to lose our freedom for that too, and we've lost a lot because of 9/11. So 9/11 is this multifaceted, really complicated thing. The Shanksville thing, the Pentagon thing. We often forget about the Pentagon and the people that died there.
Yeah.
Had nothing to do with New York. But those Twin Towers and stuff, like I always say, like, those Twin Towers were just buildings to you, right? Like, I remember being in those buildings as a kid, and I remember standing in front of them and looking up, and they were so big that they looked like they were going ahead of you. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't look like they were going straight up. They looked like they were almost on the next block. They were fucking huge. Mm-hmm. When you have those, like, touchstones in your life, like, those kinds of things mean a little bit more. So, that's kind of where I stand on that. But it's a complicated issue, and the only thing I can tell you is that it made me, on a personal level, made me respect my father more than I already did at that point. And the things he had gone through, brought me closer to him or whatever. Made me appreciate that, he might not be here today if things had gone just a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Pelch100, for that topic. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you want to see Colin talk about? Let us know in the comments. Then make sure you like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to us on YouTube. Until next time, have a conversational day.